we need to change the law. So we came up with this idea that we were going to change the law by finding a sponsor and writing a bill to try and shift the burden of proof from parents in due process. Oops, sorry. From parents in due process hearings to school districts. And the reasoning behind it was, you know what? School districts have the staff, school districts have the kids, school districts have the money, school districts have everything, and they also have to comply with the law. So why don't they have the burden of proof since they have all those responsibilities and all those resources? So our first year out, the bill was called, I think it was HB 1232. And we basically all went up to testify, and we came up there and we were telling our stories about how miserable it was to go through the IEP process and to try and go through due process. And we basically were not successful. We had to rethink how we were approaching some of the things that we talked about. So we came back the next year and we came back strong, and we put all of our effort and energy behind HB 581, which shifts the burden of proof from parents to school districts and due process hearings. That bill was actually signed into law on July 29th, 2021 by Governor Sununu and went into effect 60 days after that. Our sponsor was Representative Glenn Cordelli. We met with him and he heard us because we basically said, we are tired of being treated badly. We're tired of our kids not getting services. We're tired of not having resources. And so that's sort of how this whole thing started. And then after that, out of that came HB 381, SB 381. I'm sorry, it's SB 381, because they actually held committee meetings in October where many, many parents came out and told their stories and said what it was like to actually deal with the school district. And Glenn is here. Glenn, if you'd like to say a few words about that, you don't have to, but if you want to.
Well, just
okay, I guess not. So we wanted to sort of talk about SB 381, which would establish an office of a special education advocate so that parents have somewhere to turn to.
So I think Glenn was trying to say something, but
the parents would have somewhere to turn to that's not kind of the usual suspects of, you know, trying to go to the parent information center and not getting really. I can wait a minute.
I think we're having trouble with your bandwidth a little bit. It's going in and out. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if there's anyone that wants to speak up, you're welcome to. Okay, go ahead, Moira.
So in these committee hearings, the first committee hearing, you know, mostly involved groups that were kind of against school districts having responsibility. They wanted to repeal the bill. It's like it hasn't even been in fruition for much. And they already were like, oh, let's repeal this. We don't need it. It's not necessary. But what was amazing was many parents came out. Many parents told their stories about how difficult it was to try and get services, how, you know, and in some respects, my son is older. He's in high school. So I talked about how I'm concerned for his future. I'm concerned for his ability to be employed. And, you know, it's very stressful because as families, we know, you know, someday we're not going to be around and we want our kids to be okay. So SB 381, as I said, will establish an office of a special education advocate, someone for parents to go to who's completely independent, just for parents, for them to talk about some of the issues that they're having with IEPs, with due process. And we're hoping that it helps essentially because, as Mike Skibby said, when you have a process where schools are expected to self-police and parents are expected to assert themselves to enforce the law, it just doesn't work because we're not in a position to really do that. And schools, you know, self-policing doesn't work. They recognize that over 250 years ago. We should know better 250 years later. So I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions on the bill or any issues that they wanted to discuss.
I'll say something. I'm just wondering if whoever they choose for the advocate, if it's going to be like the help that I've been trying to get, and I get referred to like the New Hampshire DOE, and they're like no help at all. I just have been switched to person to person to person. Like, is this going to be like independent of them?
Yes,
Well,
Okay.
that's how. it's written.
and I'll just add this bit from listening on the Senate hearing. I think that's where a lot of the discussion may go, because listening to the testimony at the Senate hearing, a lot of people were testifying saying, where does this belong? And there were certain groups that felt like it naturally would fit under the DOE or the Office of the Child Advocate, and there were others that felt differently. So I would say if you have an opinion about this, this would probably be the time to,
Yeah,
write a
I
letter.
definitely don't think that it should be the New Hampshire DOE, or definitely not the Office of Child Advocate. They are like, they're a part of the Health and Human Services and DYCF. And honestly, there have been times when schools have retaliated against parents by contacting DCYF, and parents aren't going to feel comfortable. I know I wouldn't feel comfortable going to them for help out of fear.
So my name's Tracy. I actually came into the process with Moira and Kate on the second year. I have a daughter who was getting ready to exit out of school, but I knew I was going to have to file for due process. So I had come in the middle of it. What I do want to say is, listening to the Senate testimony, it was really interesting that the Office of Child Advocate did come forward and that the NHLA came forward, because I'm a longtime parent. So my daughter's always been in early supports and services and then switched over to special education. And it's this kind of known part in our state that where you go and where you don't go. And nobody would bring up the the Office of Child Advocate or NHLA, because we know that they're not going to provide that service for special education. So it was really interesting that now people are trying to find a place for something like this to go under. I just find that really interesting.
When I also would add, I've talked to many people at the DOE. I think everyone there hates me. But I feel like it's a merry-go-round where they either feed to another person or don't help you, and their time is split between parents and school districts. And the person who is supposed to handle school complaints formerly worked for my school district, and she basically told me that she didn't feel like my school district would ever do anything wrong, and she refused to take my complaint, and she refused to take 2 other parents' complaints, and she's not really independent. I mean, that's her district. She was employed there. I mean, I understand her why she thinks that way, but by the same token, like, I want help. My kid doesn't have an updated IEP for going on 9 months, and where is the help? And
I
to me,
agree.
that's incredibly frustrating.
The DOE, what I've dealt with,
I don't know how.
they,
I don't know what your experience has been. Some people.
yeah,
I just want to come in and I want to kind of play devil's advocate on this, because I think that there's a system in place that we also have to recognize that we're all kind of stuck in. That would be parents, students, educators as well. So it's one thing to know the law, but then you also have to know how the system works. And that right there is, 2 pieces that parents unfortunately have to try to navigate to be able to access special education. And you're not taught how to navigate the system. And that right there is a huge barrier when you think you can go in with the law and start citing the law, and then you come across, this barrier. But I do want to add that I hope that the office, that this new possible independent office will also provide supports for educators as well, because I think educators are also stuck in the system, not knowing the best way to support with the resources that they have available as well. So I'm just, want to
I
kind
agree
of
with that.
do both sides.
Well, the thing is that they are there for schools. Like they said that schools can tell them things, but it's supposed to be more of a dedicated resource to parents in terms of it's supposed to focus on the issues parents are facing and not so much like, you know, I think it's very different because parents get so little time from the DOE. You know, the school districts have weekly calls with the commissioner. They have training with the commissioner. They get funding. They have a lot of stuff, but where is it? That's my question.
Yeah. I mean, these are all great points, and to both of you, your points, we need to work within the, my opinion is we need to work within the system. I'm not a legislator, but you know, you can't expect a piece of legislation to solve every problem. So I think giving constructive feedback on, you know, what you would like to see with this bill within the constraints, you know, of our existing system, and just saying, yes, you know, we would like to see educators educated. And yes, it's very important for us to have this be independent of the DOE for these reasons. And it has to be sort of that constructive feedback to make change. So that's what I would like to ask of everyone here. If you have, you know, if you have that constructive feedback, if you have the suggestions, that's what I'd like to see you relay to the legislators to make the bill work for you. But knowing that it's not going to fix every problem. I mean, we need to unpack this a little bit. And if people don't know how to escalate through the system, then maybe that's another takeaway that we can work on separately to say, this is, how can we help fix that? So I don't know, just my 2 cents, but.
Well, and I agree with that. And I think the more we talk about the things that we've experienced as parents, because I don't really think legislators have heard a lot about parents' experience. We're always busy because we're trying to run around. You're trying to manage a team of medical people, and you're trying to manage insurance benefits, and you're trying to manage IEPs in schools, and you know, if your kid plays sports or has an after-school activity, or if you're trying to get a service dog, like you're trying to manage already so much. And
Yep.
then when you're trying to manage that on top of it, it's very difficult. And it honestly takes up a lot of time, and you feel like you do have to be. Someone said in the last hearing at the SB381 testimony, she said, I'm an attorney and I had to learn a whole sections of new law to even understand how to help my kid with some of these things. And, you know, I don't think
That's what
parents
I've
have
run
been,
into too.
I think parents have been a bit of an afterthought, I would say. And that's why I really would encourage you to share your experiences with legislators and to tell them what you've been through, because they're not with us. They don't necessarily know. And if you're not a special needs parent, you don't understand the burden. Actually, I'm not going to say that. If you don't understand the challenges that we face, it's not easy. I will say that.
Yeah, and when I hear you say that, I automatically think, okay, well, the Office of the Child Advocate should have some sort of legal expertise that can help you in translating some of this stuff. And that's valuable feedback to give as well. Just say, yeah, I struggle with this, and perhaps in this legislation you can, or the practical application of this is that there's some legal help in the process somewhere.
Yeah, I agree that needs to be done, because I've been trying to do it with just advocates that have been donated their time, and school just kicks the can out further and further. So it just never gets anywhere. My daughter was out of school. She had no placement. I just unilaterally enrolled her in a online private academy because I can't afford her just sitting here not getting any education at all. And I've had no help, and I've tried everyone. I've contacted everyone. So something like this would have been exactly what I would have needed. And I know I'm not the only parent. Most give up, they homeschool, or they just pay on their own.
I have 2 things I want to mention. You know, every child in the United States deserves a free and fair education. Okay. And across the board, and I appreciate all you're doing, Moira. I've been kind of watching, you know, what you're doing. And I don't think everybody's, anyone who has a special education child, and even a normal child, your concern is that child, right? And so you're also concerned is to protect that child. And whether we want to admit it or not, there is backlash when you are a parent that speaks up for your child, because then you become labeled as that parent. And I have to be honest with you, if my husband and I, we are pro school, we are pro our teachers, we are pro our paras, because those are the people that help my child get through school and get an education he deserves. But then it becomes, and I jumped from one school system to another. I would jump from one school system who did a good job, and I jumped to another school system who's done nothing. And it was very clear to me very early in the game that I was not going to get the services that I needed. So you know what we had to do in order for people to listen was to hire our advocate, was to hire a lawyer. I mean, anyone that's hired anyone like that, and you know, $800, $1,000 an hour to fight for a free education. And it's so sad, because that's all I'm asking for. That's all I'm asking for you for, is for him to get the services that he needed. I can show you the pictures of what he looked like, just even the school pictures. You know how they once a year, the school pictures? If I took my child's school picture that he had every year, once he hit the other school system, he didn't smile in his picture. You could see, and for the next 4 years, you could see it on his face. You know, what it's been horrible what he's been through. And if anyone had done this to somebody else, right? And I love this idea, but I really think we have a dam the size of the Hoover Dam, and we're only putting a Band-Aid on a hole, because I'm going to tell you, once you are protecting your child, so people don't say anything, right? People don't want you to know how awful they're having until you kind of meet, you hear this and then you hear that. I'm going to tell you, once the floodgates open, you're going to find out that a lot of children have not been treated correctly in the system. And I worry about that. I worry that a child is going to get hurt. And that's what's going to take, right? It's going to take someone who isn't providing the services that they're supposed to provide. And then my also call on this too, is that we have a special ed department. We hired people to work in a special ed department. We are paying people for their services. Why aren't we getting them? You know, and I send my kid to school every day, and I go, I'm going to tell you, I pray every day, please bring him back alive, because let's hope he survives today. And I'm sure people are afraid to talk, I'm going to tell you, but once they feel safe into talking, you are going to be horrified, because I hear the stories. I know the stories. People will share with me and go, oh, but I'm just waiting to get my kid through school. And isn't that terrible? Like we're hostages to a school, to a special ed department that we're paying with our tax bill, with our tax money, to help us, to help provide and provide an education for our child. Why isn't my child? I pay taxes. My child deserves to be educated. And I'm going to tell you, this one person, like I said, Moira, we need an office of 25 people, because I'm going to tell you, once people feel safe or feel, and you're going to, I bet you're going to hear it more from the people that are out of the system, because trust me, people are not going to, don't want to mess things up for their child for what they actually have. And it's going to be, I'm going to tell you, your biggest resource are going to be the parents that have got their kids through the system after their kids. And I even worry about my own daughter who's in the same school. You're not going to get a true answer of what happened until they're out of the system, because they're going to, no matter what, you're going to protect your child. And I'm going to tell you, I think this is wonderful. I think this is great, but I'm going to tell you, if people feel safe, you know, if we can provide a service where they feel safe, because people don't feel safe anymore. Nobody feels safe sharing their story. I'm going to tell you that Nobody does. And it's scary out there. And I can't sit back. Like I said, I've always grown up in a household. If you see something, say something. So it's by nature for me to open my big mouth. And of course, trust me, my reputation is, they can't stand me at the school. Every time I come in, they run. They can't even come and talk to me. I see them run in their offices because they don't even want to deal with me. But I'm going to say something, because if something happens to my child in that school, I can live with the fact that I said something and I did something about it. And it's not even done. Trust me, they'll tell me to my face, it's done, but it's not. And I'm worried you guys you're gonna be so overwhelmed with the responses once people feel safe. But people aren't gonna come. Do you feel, Moira, that people hold their stories back because their children are still in the system?
I do feel that people hold their stories back, but I think there are numerous reasons for that. And one of the biggest ones that I've encountered is there are people who want to speak out, but they have had an NDA put on them by a school district attorney. And that's a very real thing. And that is actually not legal, because one of the things in IDEA says that an NDA cannot be a condition of mediation. And we've been working on trying to get that out there. But I have to tell you, my kid is in school now. I have seen, after we got HB 581 passed, which was this year, Catherine got contacted by a TV station in Texas. The Texas Special Education Department was audited. Virginia is demanding an audit. They voted their governor out of office. They're now talking in Iowa. They want cameras in every classroom. There's stuff happening because parents are getting really upset, and it's not just part of it's COVID, but part of it's like people are just sick of being treated like dirt, having their kids being treated like dirt. And now, right now, 20% of every class is students with IEPs. And if we have those kids graduating, because those proficiency scores are in single digits, they can't be contributing members of our society. That's not enough for them to be, that's not enough for them to have substantive employment, to be able to earn a living, to be able to be independent. And how can we do that to 20% of our society? And I've asked that question to the legislature very honestly, because they won't be paying taxes. They won't be participating in our communities. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to the society either, because there's no balance, and I really encourage you guys to talk to people, and if a office of a special education advocate would help you tell your stories, or if there's something else that of will help you tell your stories. I really feel badly for these the parents who have NDAs, because they want to tell their stories. Some of them, some of their kids come out of school, or other things happen, and they feel like they can't tell their stories, and these attorneys tell them they have gag orders on them. There's no such thing. As an attorney, you cannot put a gag order on anyone. Only a judge can do that, and they can only do it under some very specific circumstances, like if there's a case where they don't want media getting involved while the trial is going on, something like that. Okay. So I'm sad to hear that people don't want to come forward and tell their stories. But it's miserable right now, and I don't feel like it's getting any better. If you feel like it's getting better, please let me know, because I don't. And I'm disappointed because, so anybody who knows me in my town, I just published a letter to the editor in the paper, because I went and listened to every single session of the HB 581 committee testimony in October. And one of the school district attorneys / lobbyists came forward and said, oh, you know what? We don't really need this bill. We already have a process in place. And by the way, the parents are complaining that the school districts have insurance, because they do. They have insurance, which covers their legal costs, which we don't get. So they don't have to go to a school board and explain why they have large legal fees, because their liability insurance is covering it. But this particular person said, well, we don't have to worry about that because we cover parents' legal costs when they go to mediation with us. So I sent a letter to the editor and I said, I just want you all to know that this attorney said that all school districts that he represents, and he represents, I think, all but 5, they pay parent legal costs in mediation. So if you've been through mediation, I encourage you to, contact them and get your money back. Because they're saying they reimburse it. And I know that's kind of ridiculous, because Has anybody here ever had reimbursement for anything
You-
dealing with the school district?
Well,
I haven't.
Let's take it
ever.
back. Let's take it back
So,
to SB 381.
you know, it really bothers me when people say things like that because it's just not true.
So I'm trying to listen to your stories and interpret into things that we can be constructive feedback. And the first thing that I have written down is the interpretation of the process and the laws. Like that's something that everyone needs help with. And the second thing is a safe place to give your feedback to someone independent without fear of retribution. So just try to think in terms like that of really constructive feedback that we can give. Does anyone have any other ideas what they would like to see for an Office of the Advocate, or suggestions that they would like to make, or if you could design your own, what would it look like?
Bill seems like that they'll have like a substantial role, and it also is affording money that they can hire assistants and others to help them, if I'm reading it correctly.
So yes, it would have to be a big office from what I'm hearing.
This is Tracy. I would like to be able to see parents in the roles as well. I think even if, if it's an attorney or whoever is assigned to that position, I think it would have a lot of value to have parents as well, because I think parents also do, additional education. Like there's a lot of parents in the state that have a very high level of understanding. I know the Office of Dispute Resolution out of Pennsylvania, they have a model like this as well. And they also have their parents that are embedded into the whole process.
So
Their parents are more educated in so many regards than the actual people that are employed
100%.
in the process.
I agree.
100%.
And as far as the retaliation goes, it's not only the retaliation against the parents, it's the fear of retaliation against the student, because my son is actually voicing very loudly and clearly right now that he's being retaliated against. He's actually come home last week, actually, and begged me not to say anything about something because he knew that if I said anything, that he would be actually, in his words, punished.
Make it work.
And
Oh my
it was all about, and all I wanted to do was question. They actually dropped his English 11 class without communicating to me at all. And there still has not been any communication to me whatsoever. He has just begged me not to say anything to them because he thinks he's going to be punished.
Or they don't tell you. My son has got to the point where he doesn't tell me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my son can't help himself for telling me, but he is just, beside himself because I said that I have to call because I have to find out what, I can't pretend like I don't know. Of course, he doesn't understand that, but he is absolutely in fear of being punished.
And then you also worry about the siblings that are in school too, right? Because that trickles, you know what I mean? Like that's my concern. I got to be really careful because I still got 3 years with another daughter that's going to the same school, and there's no doubt in my mind that they know who she is. You know what I mean? It's scary. And it's so funny, if a normal human being in a normal world, if anyone ever got treated like that in the outside world, it's heartbreaking. It really is. I mean, it breaks my heart that we cannot even provide a safe school for our children, and we have nowhere else to send them. Like, let's be honest, like, we have to send them to the school unless we want to pay privately. And anyone that has a health or a special need kid, we're already I deal with medicines. I have to pay for all this other stuff. And it's a financial burden on us, but we had no choice. We had to hire an advocate. We had to hire a lawyer. We had to that's another additional, having a special ed kid, and you have additional things that you're still taking care of, making sure they have services that the school does not provide. So that your child needs these services, so you have to pay out of pocket for them. I mean, you would be horrified to see the budget that we have, because we're trying to provide him with services that he needs. And sometimes we have to go outside of school and there's no waiver or anything. We got to pay out of pocket. And it's tragic. It's tragic. It really is. And I'm going to tell you, we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's going on, and people and people are going to be horrified.
Well, also,
let me ask you this, the group, when I think of an independent office of the advocate, I worry about their level of influence over people that they'll need to report this stuff to. So it's great from the perspective of the parent who feels like there won't be any retribution and they're not going to be tattled on into the system, but they also need a level of influence on the process. So when I hear, okay, they're going to be over here, will they have the influence to get to the Department of Education or get to the people that are actually responsible for change? And do you guys have any thoughts on that? Do you know of any systems where that works?
I was just going to say that my concern also is the district's use of DCYF as retaliation and the effect that they would have on the other offices and agencies. Because to me, I think there's, especially with the highlight of the Harmony Montgomery case in particular, but and the other kids that have, the other boy that was missing and everything. I mean, the school districts are wasting so many resources with using DCYF as retaliation against all of these families. I can't tell you that, it started with me in 6th grade, that all of a sudden I'm going to an IEP meeting, and unknown to me, I show up and there's a DCYF officer there and I had no idea why. And it turned out that they were, the school was accusing me of educational neglect, and which is absolutely laughable because, I'm going back to kindergarten, accusing them of not providing services and, requesting services.
Well, if you were engaging in educational neglect, you wouldn't be there.
Right. And, and so for them to have DCYF at an IEP meeting, especially unknown to me, without having any preparedness or anything like that. I mean, it's absurd. And so the DCYF officer came back to the house, and he was, really frustrated because obviously there was no reason for it, and dismissed it right then. But still, I mean, they have reported me to DCYF multiple times. And, as far as for such absurd things as for my son saying, oh, wait, I have to go get my water bottle. My mom's going to have my head, and that is a report to DCYF. I mean, that is absurd. Mm-hmm. And so they are just looking for, but it was because we were in the middle of an IEP. It was actually right before we went to due process, that it turned into this, report to DCYF because it fit their, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Is
Intimidate.
is there a
So,
body
you
that
know,
gives, is there
and
a,
and I have a whole team of people. And so luckily the DCYF, they put it right to my son's parole officer, and he's like, yeah, forget it, goodbye. You know, because he's been sitting on all the IEP meetings and everything. So they know that what the school's been up to, but I mean, it's ridiculous.
as far as IEP meetings, is there a governing body that gives you ground rules and sort of like what's going to happen before you get there? And I've heard a couple people say over the last few months that they have been blindsided when they walk into an IEP meeting with people they weren't expecting to be there.
All the time.
Is there anything in the handbook, or I know people are referring to the purple book, that says these are your rights? And
Procedure safeguard book.
I'm
They'll
sorry.
just
You can request an agenda, but that doesn't mean that they stick to it either, or they'll do whatever they want. You can invite whoever you want too, but that doesn't mean that, you know, they'll have whoever they want show up.
Is that
Well,
something you would think would be helpful as to know, like there's ground rules, if they're going to invite people, you need 48 hours notice or a week's notice ahead of time, so you're not getting shanghai?
So Janan, there are already things that are in the special education process. The thing is that these are just procedural violations, and they're just a slap on the wrist, and the district just has to say that they'll do better. So,
Right.
And so going back to what you originally asked, I think the benefit of having this office is there'll actually be, not to say that the Department of Education doesn't have standard operating procedures. I mean, do they? Because I know for each individual, there's something different that, you know, a different way that they do a process. And maybe the goal needs to be as well for this, this office is to have standard operating procedures so that everybody has the shared information of how the process works, you know, what the outcomes can be, how to hold people accountable, all of that transparency that families in the community don't get.
Okay, and in the chat, Representative Cordelli just listed that HB 1141 amendment sets ground rules for who can attend IEP meetings based upon IDEA.
They do, but the districts don't follow the districts don't follow the rules, and no one holds them accountable. And even when you follow the procedures on how to file a complaint against them for breaking the procedural rules, like let's say, okay, so one of the, like my special ed director made a change to an IEP unilaterally. Okay, you're not allowed to make a change to an IEP without the whole team being on board. But he did, and that's a procedural, you know, rule. But so I made a complaint to the state. But when you get to that point, then they go and, like Tracy said, you go through the whole complaint process, which takes months because the state will ask you for copies and copies and copies of everything. And then you have to provide all the copies. And then all they do is then they'll turn around and then they'll tell the district that they're in the wrong, and they'll, you know, make them do right by either saying that they'll do better, or they'll either try to correct it if there's something that they can correct, and then they just get a slap on the wrist. And like what I've said in the past is that until the districts are going to get charged or fined or something, they're not going to make any of these. They're not going to follow the rules because, you know, nothing hurts them until they get fined.
Interesting. Okay.
In my opinion, I mean, they don't care.
And
Okay.
I'd be interested to know what kind of clout this person has, right? What their credentials are. You know, I mean, it's awful. We've all learned by fire what our children's rights are, right? And or had to hire professionals. So we need to make sure that whoever's in this office, and like I said, it's not going to be an office of one. It's going to come in and it's going to be a rainstorm, you're going to need the, I guess the thing is, what's going to hold them accountable? Because trust me, they get slapped on the hand all the time, right? All the time they get slapped on the hand. I mean, even for my example, I had 14 complaints and we went through due process and they came back and said, we talked to the school and these are the ones we're going to address, right? They chose with the school, which ones that my complaint was. My complaint was about the school. I mean, it's kind of, you know, and then they got a slap on the hand for paperwork. They didn't file paperwork and everything was thrown out. They work hand in hand.
Did you appeal them taking stuff out of your complaint or your due process?
Oh, listen, we've got to the point where my child now is 17, 18, and I want to be honest with you, I'm exhausted. We've paid lawyers, we've paid advocates. We've got to the point where, like, you know what? We're just going to jump in, hold our nose, and get through the year. I mean, I've got to that point. Why am I going to? It has been such a process that it's a waste of my money. I mean, I'm done fighting. I'm to that point. I'm going to voice what happened to me. I'm going to share what happened to us. I want to fight for other parents. But we've got to the point where, so we appeal. So what does that mean, right? That's many more months. That's many more, you know, lawyer bills.
I like her.
What's that? It's horrible. And I want parents, why do I have to hire a lawyer to fight for my child's right to be educated? Like, why do I have to do that?
All right.
That's so sad. Nobody has the money to do that. Nobody has the time unless you have a parents or an inheritance. The money, it does affect you. I get to the point where I got to make sure I got to have money for my child's, you know, medicine and his services. I'm tired of fighting a system that is not going to get fixed. It's a broken system, and I know that the Department of Education is probably trying to do the best, because I'm sure this COVID really sent them in the tailspin. But we really have to, if we're going to do this, we've got to make sure that we're helping really helping them, and them feeling that they're going to get some results. I mean, we went back to our lawyer and advocate. I'm like, what did that do for us? Nothing. We're back down to square one again. And it's terrible. And now, so what do we now? We have an additional, you know, lawyer bill and advocate bill. So that's what we got out of it. We got that out of it, but you know, the school got a slap on their hand. They didn't have to, you know, pay for representation or, you know, learn a law that, you know, it's just a shame. I'm sorry. I think it's terrible. And I think that I love this idea, but we've got to make sure we have somebody in there that has some clout and not shaking hands with the other people. Like, I just, you know, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that we have, because what's going to happen is someone's going to get hurt, right? Something terrible is going to happen to a child. And then where are we from there, you know?
Yep. Well, there's a lot going on in this space. And just another point, Representative Cordelli and Senator Reagan mentioned this also. I assume they're talking about the same thing, but there's a performance audit going on right now on the DOE special ed scope of work is sort of being defined. I think Senator Reagan mentioned that they're expecting something back by the end of March. So I'm hoping it's going to be pretty comprehensive audit that will look at all this stuff, and some good, strong legislation will come out of it. But as we wrap up here, you know, I wanted to just recap what I've heard. You guys seem to be in agreement on a bunch of different things, but your opinion of the Office of Special Advocate is that you're interested in having it be independent for a number of reasons, just for safety of communication, retribution, just because the existing system may not have been completely effective for you. But that office also needs to be staffed appropriately and have some sort of accountability and escalation that has influence, so the proper thing can be done for your child. And then you would like to see the parents involved because you feel they have a higher level of understanding than maybe some of the people that are in the system. So whether it's an advisory council or some level of involvement with the parents with this group. And then also the understanding of the laws there. If this Office of the Advocate comes through, if there were some legal sort of people in there that could help interpret, that would be a tremendous asset as well. So that's what I'm getting from you. Is that
Good
accurate?
job.
I'm really good at taking a lot of information and consolidating it.
That was good.
Usually.
I also just wanted to emphasize the parents were the ones who asked for the audit. You know, we were kind of inspired by the state of Texas and the state of Virginia, and we said, you know what, we want an audit too, because we're not quite sure that we're doing this correctly. Why is it that this OCR memo says this, but New Hampshire DOE does that? And why is it that all of the due process decisions are written in state law only when this is a federal thing? And, you know, to your point about insurance, you know, since schools are now supposed to be covering certain services.
Oh, she gone?
Moira.
Moira, you're on mute
So-
or gone.
I'm sorry. So, you know, insurance companies are starting to say schools are supposed to be paying for that. And we don't want that to happen to kids. We want everyone to keep their services and obviously have their kids be the best that they can be. You know, I know it's, you know, you're supposed to have a certain level of benefit from all this stuff, but really we should be having children come out of the system educated and ready to engage in the community and have substantive employment and be independent. And it says independent living right in IDEA. It actually says it right in there. So, you know, we agree with you, and we don't want to lose more stuff just because of that as well.
Well, I'm going to say that that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, exactly. So we could be on here all night and we only slot an hour, so.
So my son just staged out of school, and there's no services out there for them. There's none. So I quit my job and I am his person. So instead of having, you know, separate lives, we are now more intertwined. So that's where I am. So I have been through transition, which was non-existent, and this is where we ended up. So I'm okay with it now.
Okay.
And that's part of it too, though, because you want your kid to have some level of independence. You want them to leave the house, you know? Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm not quite there yet because my son's still in school, but I think there have been other parents who've started working on that more intensely.
All right. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of your feedback. I'm going to write it in a document and send it to you all, just to make sure that I have it on the mark. If you want to give your feedback, I can help you do that directly. You can do it on your own. I'm happy to make a statement letter and send it on behalf of this group as well. So we can just kind of figure that out as we move forward, I guess. And I just want to thank you all very much for voicing your opinions and giving me something to work with here and coming together as a group to support, because there's some great stuff going on, and I'm really grateful for all of you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you listening, you know, taking it in, taking a moment to listen, because that gets to the point where nobody, you know, I appreciate everyone showing up tonight, myself, because I'm like, am I out here by myself? I don't know. I'm sure you've all felt this way. That am I the only person that's dealing with this? Maybe it's me, you know, maybe it's me. And it gives me hope. It gives me hope that, you know, we'll get something done for them.
You're not alone.
No, you're not.
You're not.
But doesn't
And
it feel though, some days I feel like, you know, like that you're all by yourself fighting this fight, that
Fighting this big giant
huge
all by
giant,
yourself.
like fighting a corporation. You're not, you know, there's no, I just feel like maybe, you know, just to hear somebody else go, yeah, that happened to me too, you know, it just makes it all worth it when you say, okay, then it's just not me. I'm just not, you know, they already call me crazy, but am I crazy? Maybe.
We're all
And I
crazy,
think
Caroline.
too, a lot of parents that are getting involved in the process down in the elementary school levels, that they don't know any of this stuff.
No.
And I didn't know any of it. And I just said, yep, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Until, you know, and things move along, and then you get up where they're more adult, they're more mature. And yeah, things usually go downhill from there. So,
I think there's distinct points. I think that, transition to middle school is kind of a disaster. And
Mhm.
then going into high school, you can really, really see it. And you try to say, hey, wait a minute. And they're like, oh, too late. We're graduating you. Get out. Don't let the door hit you. But I did also want to mention that Glenn had mentioned HB 1141. Testimony is actually being heard on HB 1141 at the State House on Friday at 11 a.m. I am planning on going up. I don't know who else is. I'm hearing that there's going to be snow, which I'm not thrilled about. But I'm hoping that, people definitely get either come up and testify, sign in remote support, or send in written testimony. We appreciate it. And honestly, I really feel like the legislators need to hear from parents because you guys are the front line. You're the ones who are dealing with this directly. It's all well and good when a lobbyist comes up and says, hey, nothing to see here, no problems, no problems. But that's not the real world. And we know that. And we need to speak up.
Just piggyback on that, because I think what's important that is
Friday at 11.
What's important is for the last 2 years or through the whole process, it's been families that have organized with other families to push this forward. It's not families attaching themselves with anything else but other families and helping other families figure out what they need to do and support their voice to be heard. And that's, I think, a really missing piece on why this has been so important for families organizing together.
Great.
And I have to tell you too, like the school districts for the HB 581 committee, and when we were when Senator Reagan was formulating SB 381, and that whole process, families, there were some meetings where families didn't even come. And I made sure I went to every single one because I was going to be darn sure that if anybody said anything that I didn't think was true, that I was going to get up there and say, wait a minute. I've never been reimbursed for mediation. I've never been reimbursed my legal costs. No, I don't think that's correct because I do think there are problems with single digit proficiency score, and it really does have an impact because we are the front lines. Some of these lobbyists have been around for 50 years, and I don't think they've set foot in a classroom in that period of time. And we're trying to get in. I have 2 parents trying to do classroom observations and being denied. I have people who are trying to recover their kids from COVID. It's just there's so much going on, and it's just so important. And I know everybody's busy. I'm busy, the whole thing with running in Boston Children's and managing and medications and everything else. But it's when we don't speak that then they're believed. Then they say, oh, well, nobody came, so therefore it must be fine. These lobbyists must be correct. And that's not really the way it is. And I don't like when they say that either, because I think the reality is that they know it's not true, but that's what they say.
All right. Well, we're going to get some voices heard. And thank you all. That
Senator Cordelli said, watch the House site for any update on the Friday hearing in the storm.
okay. I'm going to be bummed if they cancel Friday because that's going to be a hopping day over at the State House. So I'm looking forward to it.
Heard, yeah. Well, hopefully the snow waits a little while and it's later.
Yeah. All right, you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Mhm.
Thank you for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Hi, Sandy.
Bye.
Mhm.